Hello and welcome to Autistic FM. My name is Haya, I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the conductor that will try to keep this orchestra playing more or less the same tune. You can subscribe to Autistic FM wherever you get your podcasts, and it would be really awesome if you did. That's how we keep you around. Over on our website at autistic.fm, you can find episode transcripts and additional information. We also have discussion threads for each individual episode, a Neurospicy discussion forum, and much more. And all of that is free. If you become a supporter for as little as $5 a month, you can get a sneak preview of all the topics we have coming up, and even submit questions to our guests. You can also add topics to our future topics wishlist, and you can get access to supporters-only discussion groups. We have a whole bunch of additional supporter treats coming up, so stay tuned. In this episode of the podcast, I am thrilled to be joined by Ampersand, also known as Andy, who brings a fresh perspective on life through the lens of neurodefiance. Ampersand's unique journey of self-discovery touches on themes of authenticity, gender identity, and spiritual connection to the universe. Our conversation explores deep topics including societal expectations, questioning religious norms, and confronting the discrimination and isolation faced by so many neurodivergent individuals. And we even have a cameo from Ricky Gervais. I didn't see that coming, TBH. I have some content warnings for this episode. We discuss childhood trauma, mental health, and neurodivergence. We talk about racism and discrimination, gender identity, we do some religious critique, and we discuss some feelings of isolation. Please do take care of yourself and listen with care. Oh, and a quick additional note. There was some weird stuff happening with the recording, and from time to time, Ampersand cuts out a little bit. Where what Andy was saying is really important, I tried to make up for it either by kind of repeating what is said, but for some of it, I ended up using this wacky AI voice to kind of fill in some stuff.
Oh, hi there. You'll hear more from me later.
It's an experiment. I don't really know if it worked. If it's really annoying, I'm sorry. But yeah, hopefully in the future recordings will go a little bit smoother. With all of that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Welcome back to another episode of Autistic FM. I'm joined by a really exciting guest. My lovely guest, what is your name and what pronouns do you use?
My name is Ampersand, and you can call me And or Andy. And if you're still using patriarchal pronouns, I'm okay with any pronouns. I think pronouns it's not something that I focus on, especially I like it as more of an energetic thing. You use the pronoun of the energy that I'm giving you. So, but mostly I just prefer my name.
Over text, we've nerded out about ampersands and various
Yeah.
typographical
The
signs
interrobang.
and stuff. And
Yeah.
the interrobang, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the various fun characters that exist in the world and that people thought we needed and completely fell out of use. But clearly people fought for them passionately enough that at some point they kind of broke through the consciousness. And so going by ampersand, like I feel that is a pronoun in a way, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's the I am
It's
all
like
the things.
I am ampersand. It is a symbol. The word ampersand is actually a corruption of the phrase. It's a Latin phrase, and per se and, which means and by itself means and. And so that's kind of what I'm taking my stance on, is that I am asserting myself. So when people try to see me one way or put a projection on me, I get, this whole process of what I'm doing is me really knowing myself. And so for me to call myself ampersand is me taking that big step. And for most people, they just call me Andy, and it's fine. But
Right.
sometimes I like to be ampersand.
Right. I like that. It's like my full official name. Yeah, for sure.
I was gonna link back to the gender thing. I want to be seen as a whole person, and so this is my push towards just being seen as a whole person. Because with the gender thing, I don't care what gender people see me as or how I feel. It's just I'm really shooting for authenticity and just being a whole person, which I think is the issue with pronouns. You get stereotyped because everyone uses that pronoun for every person they know.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I hear in all of that like a very strong defiance against being labeled, and I very much agree with that, or I feel that. And I think there's something like, I love fractals, right? And the fractal contains the entire fractal. I love Zen Buddhism. Like, I contain the entire world and the entire world is me. And ampersand kind of, to me at least, I don't know if this is a massive projection, but to me, it sounds like it's kind of variations on that theme. Does that sound right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to me, the way I look at the ampersand is that it's really, you could combine it with like an 8 or an infinity and a less than integer, as in like you are greater than the universe. We are an infinite expression of the universe. And so the way I kind of look at it is like there's infinity, there's a universe, there's source or whatever, and it's always just bouncing off, and we're cyclic, and we're always expanding. We're an infinite expression. So I don't like limiting us. Or I don't like limiting myself in that way. I like looking out for that growth, which is something that is difficult in society.
You know what I love about this podcast? We are less than 4 minutes in, and we're talking about the nature of the universe and the existence of consciousness.
It needs to get spoken of. It's very important.
I should point out here that Ampersand's audio is cutting in and out a little bit in this recording. When the audio is almost impossible to hear, I'll cut in with this semi-creepy AI voice to explain what's happening. In this case, Andy explains they've been listening to the Telepathy Tapes podcast.
I got to episode 10, and I was really, I'm rejuvenated. I'm really happy that they are able to share their story, because it's important that we realize that we are more.
Andy then goes on to say that they are psyched. There are stories of people being more than their physical bodies, as they discuss in the podcast.
Yeah, 100%. The Telepathy Tapes is... I listened to it all. I need to go back and listen to it all again. I haven't cried this much since... Like, I feel like the original serial put me to tears a couple of times, but this one is definitely like, it speaks to my heart. And it's waking up some experiences and some memories that I haven't examined for 30 years, you know? And so there's grief in there, there's excitement in there. It feels like we're in the middle of some sort of weird paradigm shift, and I don't even really know where that's coming from.
I suspect where it's coming from. Excuse me. If you don't mind, I'll back up and tell a little bit about my origin, if that's all right. And that will
please,
sort of
we
lead us
kind
back
of
to this
crashed straight
conversation.
into it.
Yeah.
let me do the responsible podcasting host thing and say, hey Andy, where in the world are you?
I am in the Empire. I'm in the Imperial Core, America.
Okay.
So far, yeah. I
Wonderful.
want to move. I want to move. I'm not sure where, but
Okay.
yeah. So.
And the second standard question I typically ask people is like, hey, how did you discover you are neuro something? And in your case, you have a whole different language for that, and I am excited to learn more.
Well, yeah, and I briefly, like, the short version is, I, like, after many, struggles with socializing and everything, I Googled it one day. I'm like, am I autistic? Did a bunch of quizzing, and it's like, yeah, you probably are. But that was about 18 years ago, and we do know we know so much more, and it's looked at so differently. Because back then, it's like, you're autistic, okay, find a special interest and good luck. I did join, like, online communities, and it just, it never really, like, it wasn't something I internalized. I was more worried about my safety, like trying to survive in capitalism and everything, just worked my job and everything. And but to start with me, to go back to, like, what neurodefiance is and how I really look at myself and what sets me apart, at least in my head. Some of the stories I have are from when I'm, like, under the age of 9, and that is a super important time for me, because that's when you're, like, you're your most authentic self, when you're just a little kid. So and I'm sorry if I get a little emotional, because this is my childhood, and it isolated me, but I want to remain resilient with what happened. So one of the first examples I have, I want to say under the age of, like, around 6 or 7, and I was raised like generic American Christian, so I believed in Jesus, and I learned all the Bible stories, and I would read books and VHS tapes and go to church, and, like, I was totally a believer. And I was playing in my room alone one day, and the 700 Club was on TV, and I remember watching it, and I was not okay with what I was watching. I was actually very upset. What I noticed was that the guy that they put in the center of all these people to make fun of, to shame, I could see him for how he really felt. And when they panned to the audience, I could see how much they were enjoying his suffering. They weren't hurt by his actions. It's like, if you want to call something a sin and say, oh, you're hurting us, you're hurting our flock, I did not see that. And I, in my most dramatic self, and this is what I love about me, so dramatically stomped over to my VHS tapes and just stared them down. And I was like, do I want lessons from these people? No, I didn't. And I don't know what happened, but, like, I broke down a few weeks later and tried to find the tapes. They were gone. And then my family broke up, and then I didn't have to go to church anymore, and I wasn't raised Christian. I lost my faith. But I really did feel something kind of, like, change within me when that happened. And I didn't tell anybody. You know, it wasn't something I talked to my parents about, or my brother. I only have one
Right.
other sibling. And so it was just a decision I made on my own to just go, ew, ew, I'm not I'm not messing with that. Um, and that I rejected Christianity for a long time. The important part is just about a year ago, I came back to the church, not to become a Christian, but I do go to the food bank there, and I am not ashamed of that. And it's something also for any neurodivergent people, it helps so much. And so I was able to push aside how I felt about those people. But I do have to say, the people at the church, they were the people at the churches here in the food bank, they're kind of racist. They still are. They yeah. And like I hate to have to look at them in this light, but I saw that behavior and they would treat me extra kind because I spoke English.
Ampersand tells the story of how they offered help for people who didn't speak English find their way to the food bank.
And now
Mm-hmm.
it's doubled. It's like literally it's double the amount of people and none of them speak English. So I'm there doing the Lord's work. I really am. Mostly a joke, but like
Yeah.
halfway, you know. But like I get the benefits from them. I don't have to convert, and I get to see them practice what they preach. And that to me is the most important part, that they stay respectful. And then I'm in community with people who are from very different parts of the world.
Yeah. There's so many wonderful things to ask you questions about there. I was an exchange student for a hot minute in Georgia in the US, and went to a Southern Baptist church, and learned a lot about things that were completely alien to me because I grew up non-religious, and got myself into lots of different forms of trouble that way. But at some point somebody was like, well, you're not a Christian, are you an atheist? I was like, look, if I'm being super honest with you, I am not even an agnostic. Religion means so little to me that even labeling me as an atheist or an agnostic recognizes that I care enough to label me as an atheist or an agnostic. Like I cannot explain to you how little I care about religion as long as it doesn't harm anyone. And if it harms it, if your religion harms someone, I'm anti your religion. But that doesn't mean I'm anti your God. And people looked at me, and I was like 15 or 16. People looked at me and were like, okay, well, this is weird. I was like, I don't know what to tell you, man. I just couldn't care less. And I don't, like, I'm wasting more breath right now explaining to you how little I care than I have ever cared about religion. And it was like one of those moments where I was like, oh yeah. But even the label of not being the thing was offensive to me, right? I was like, it doesn't feel like it fits.
Because it's still centering them, and in that position is like an
Right.
opposite of that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I feel that.
Ricky Gervais does a really good piece where he goes, how many gods do you believe in?
You believe in one God, I assume, but there are about 3,000 to choose from. So basically, you believe in one less God than I do. You don't believe in 2,999 gods, and I don't believe in just one more.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, there's something to that. And look, I don't want to shit on religion. I think religion does a lot of really beautiful things, and people get a lot of strength from it, and good things happen out there. I think this goes to the whole neurodefiance thing. And I think that's actually important for neurodivergent people, because exactly the defiance piece we're talking about.
Yeah, and I think with the whole pronoun thing too, sometimes it just kind of feels a little like presumptuous to ask too, because to me sometimes I'm like, why are you going to talk of me? Because that's what the pronoun is for. It's like, you're going to talk about me. So I'm like, it just like, it's still not normalized to me to do, and I actually get a little uncomfortable about it because people look at me and I'm not really gender conforming, so they think I want to be trans. I've had people do that to me, and that's actually harmful to me. Like if I tell them my pronouns and my gender and then they just completely bypass it, I have had that happen. So it was a case where I even gave my pronouns and my gender and they still disregarded it. So it's like, yeah, it's good to know different pronouns if you want to use something completely different than he, him, she, her. That's why I like saying my name. I'm like, just say my name. And just and I would like at some point in time to have a larger discussion about why pronouns hurt so much, because I think it has to do with that stereotyping, the specific limited roles, and especially going back to religion, that's part of the restrictions that they have. I can recognize that and acknowledge that it does contribute to a lot of that shared pain that we have. And my way of doing it was to just metaphorically flip him off.
And the truth is, you're right. Like, I will never use a pronoun when I'm talking to you. I will only use a pronoun when I'm talking about you. And the truth is, I will record an introduction to this podcast during which I will talk about you, and I would be horrified if I hurt you in that process.
Yeah, I was gonna say it gets you to be more creative. But to me, it was always that's the reason why I became Ampersand, because I don't know if that's obvious. Not my first name, but I upgraded. Was because it was about being a person to me. The problem I have with pronouns is when people turn my she into every she, and that restriction and that flattening, and then the societal roles that you're supposed to perform those roles rather than yourself. And I'm like, keep trying to tell me to be like every other her and she that you know. So as long as somebody's using them respectfully.
Yeah. And there's something in there, right? Assuming that other people think you are like every other she, her. Like, I have met many she, hers who are very different from each other, right? And so I just want to check something with you. Is what you are saying there a rebellion to the presumption that is built into the patriarchy?
Yeah, I think so. It's not personal to like you know. Yeah, I think it's kind of fun to come up with different terms and stuff too, and different words, and Andy, because it's kind of cute, you know. And then and or Andy, to me, like they're already words, and I don't know if you could try to use them as pronouns, but it's words that your brain already like knows how to say really easily.
Yeah.
So it's fun to play.
I love playing, and I think this is part of the curiosity of leaving nothing unexamined, right? I feel like this is something that neurospicy folks or neurodefiant folks are very good at. It's like, hey, why are we accepting something that we haven't examined? And I feel like post-examination, you can go, okay, well, actually, this part of how society looks at things, I 99% agree with, and it's not worth my energy to examine it further, so I'm just going to accept it. And another piece, you can go, this does not feel good. This is a hangover from a bygone era that we have left behind, and we are better than this. We can write a new script for it.
Yeah, and that really is, I think, where we're heading towards, or at least where I'm trying to head towards with Neurodefiance, is trying to challenge those scripts. I feel like sometimes when I experiment, like with my hair and everything, the response I get is so, without asking me how I feel about it or the underlying current, it's always about the looks, that I have struggled with expressing my gender, because it seems like even with everyone trying to be respectful, it still gets reduced down, especially in the visual spectrum. So that's actually where most of my pain is coming from. Like, people look at me and we're like, especially when it comes to like maybe trying to date or something, people are still really focused on looks. And I'm just not, I'm more of like a cerebral person. So that to me is more where I have, I guess, some more of my pain. In expressing yourself in such a strongly visual way too, which is, as I think, another like sort of hangover, I like that term, hangover from a bygone era, is focusing so much on your looks too to present yourself. And then people get so scared because they look at you and then they're supposed to make a snap judgment, and we don't really give each other enough time to really fully explain who we are. You know, it feels like people, they want to try to get to know you right away, and if you're not knowable, they just kind of walk away or project on you.
And I think to me that's kind of a blessing, right? There was a hot minute there where I had bright purple hair, and I mean, I have a long history of wearing really weird glasses. And to me, my glasses are interesting. Like, the only disability that I was aware of I had for a long time is that I am essentially blind without my glasses. And so I could choose to get LASIK, or I can wear glasses. And to me, the thought of pointing lasers in my eyes, like, there's something very like viscerally wrong about that. And so it's glasses. And at some point it's like, wait a minute, what a blessing to have a very severe disability that can be solved with a $50 piece of plastic. What a blessing. Like, there's so many disabilities that don't have that privilege, right? And without my glasses, I can barely find my way around my house. But with them, I am fine. My vision is 20/20 with glasses. And so it's one of those things where, hey, I want to have some fun with this. If I'm going to be wearing this crap on my face like 18 hours a day, let me have some fun glasses and let me actually go like, yeah, no, I'm not hiding this. This is me celebrating how easy it is to correct my disability.
And can I ask, where do you get those frames from? Is it like a clip-on kind of frame, or are they all
Yeah,
different glasses?
they're magnetic, and so they come from a place called Pear Eyewear. And actually, I used to work in venture capital back in many years ago, and we actually ended up investing in this company. So I know the founders. They originally started it as a company to help kids who were getting bullied. Like, hey, let's do something fun with glasses. And so I really get behind their mission. And I was haranguing them since day one. It's like, please make these in adult sizes. And when they finally did, I was like, cool. And so now I have like, I don't know, 30 top frames and sunglasses and all the different, and so it changes like sometimes several times a day. And
Yeah,
like, it's
that
fun. And I own a 3D printer. I have printed my own frames because why not? Like,
I would
I get to have
swap
fun
them
with
from
this.
different moods. I would like whatever my mood is, I would change based on my different moods.
I have one pair that has tiny little skulls on it. And if you ever meet me wearing my skull glasses, give me some space.
That's perfect. Expressing yourself in such a way, it's like, yeah, that I
But I
like that a
think this
lot.
is why so many autistic folks or so many neurospicy folks have bright colored hair. It's like, hey, I'm a poison frog. Know what you're getting into. If you want to engage with me, that's fine, but I am different.
Yeah, I don't like the dyed hair. I actually dyed my hair a couple years ago, and I hated it so much. I bathed my head instead. I'd rather be bald
Which has the same
personally.
effect, right? To a lot of people.
Right. And that, yeah, that was interesting, but I personally did not like that. But it's funny that you said that people are like poison frogs, because this is part of my philosophy as I've been working on myself, is that I wanted to take that poison and turn it into venom. And I wanted to be far more selective and intentional about who would get
Uh-huh.
that material, because it's not that I want to walk around like looking invisible, but it's more like I don't want to be poisonous or toxic to the wrong people.
Right. So I know the difference between poison and venom, but for a listener who doesn't, I think the short summary of that typically is like, poisonous things, they hurt you if you eat them, and venomous things hurt you if
Mm-hmm.
they bite you.
It eats you,
So
yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's like
Are you eating
offensive
it?
or
It's eating
defensive.
you. Yeah.
Right.
For me, I think I
Right.
was actually doing that on accident, as you do. You end up, getting beat up by life. But that's something that and working on, and I'm still not sure how to best visually express myself. But I am glad that you found the glasses, and I love that it's it just comes off and on like magnetic. That's so fun.
Yeah. It takes like a fraction of a second. Yeah,
No, that's what I'm thinking, because I just got these and I don't like them. But because
Mm-hmm.
I was making that thing LASIK, it's like, do I want lasers in my eyeballs? I don't know about that.
Right.
A little
And
squeamish
the
about
thing
that
is,
one.
like, the statistically, it's probably going to be okay. There's like a 0.5% chance of something going horribly wrong in either eye. So you end up with a 0.5% because you have two eyes. And like, statistically, I'm like, look, I do many more risky things than that every day. And I am an extremely visual person. And the thought of losing vision in one eye, even with the slightest chance because of a voluntary procedure, that's just not worth the risk. Like, if I were to somehow get into an accident and they were like, hey, we have to relieve the pressure in your eyes, and while we're in there, we may as well do the LASIK, I'm like, yeah, go for it. But I don't think that typically happens.
No, that'd be pretty funny though. It's like, whoops,
To be
but you
an
get an
extremely
upgrade.
specific accident.
No, yeah, I actually am having surgery this month, but not on my eyeballs. And I was like, do I want to finally get LASIK this year? Because I'm similar, like vision is really important to me. Um, and I decided I'm not gonna. I decided to just keep the glasses in for now. So I'm gonna fix up some other things instead.
Yeah. Tell
Like,
me about your
oh, sorry.
Neurodefiant manifesto. Like, I want to get into like, what is the thing you are excited about with that? Because you talk about it with such passion and clarity, and it makes me really excited.
I think for me, it wasn't even a choice. It just happened. So just to back up a little bit, you said you're not religious at all. I said ew to religion. Um,
Right.
but I am I do feel connected to the universe in like a more spiritual way, in the way that I do acknowledge that I think we're more than our material bodies is at least the basis for that. So that's really where it
Yeah.
started with Neurodefiance, is that I basically refused to go insane. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I refuse. I refuse to fail. That failure is not an option for me, which is an Apollo
Right.
13 quote, but I just internalized that. And I was really not doing well. I was really struggling and suffering with the same things that most neurodivergent people suffer with, the social issues, isolation, people misunderstanding or intentionally not understanding you, that sort of game, and just getting so frustrated. And I had something happen to me, and it was wholly solely good, and it made me realize everything kind of about my life, that I was really settling for less. And it was really painful to realize that, like, everyone around my life, like, I was trying to make new connections and new friends, and everyone was just chasing. Everyone was like, I have to work, I need a job, I need their stability, their safety. No one really wanted to unpack their issues and talk about things. And so I basically took a job away from my area and away from all my friends.
Ampersand explains that a psychosis was dangerously close to happening, but then refused to submit to it.
But I said no. I said, I'm not doing that. We're not going to do that. We're going to get through this. And that's where a lot of the more like consciousness stuff, relating back to the telepathy tapes. So I started having more access to that. I started unpacking a lot of the societal conditioning, a lot of that patriarchal conditioning, a lot of that masking, just undoing it, working through the emotions and not settling there, because that's what I see from so many people. We're just settling on our feelings. But I don't know what exactly happened, but when that happened, when that awakening happened, I realized how important my senses were to me, especially my hearing. And I basically, so I don't remember if you remember the part in the telepathy tapes.
I do, but for the sake of the one or two listeners who may not have listened to the telepathy tapes yet, do you want to just quickly summarize?
Yeah, sure. So a synchronicity, at least for me and my understanding, is when, at least the way that I feel I am in sync, is when my internal world matches my external world, and I feel like I'm getting guidance from some non-material energy, or what people might call a spirit or a spirit guide. And that's when, for me, like, I might be thinking in my head, coming to conclusions, and I know that it's for me. Or when you see like your angel numbers, your 777, and it's like a sign to work on your spirituality, stuff like that. And you just know, like, it's part of the process for me, is that when you see it, it's instant. You don't overthink it. You don't go, I wonder if that sign was for me. You just, it connects to you. It's synchronous and seamless with your experience. And you're able to integrate that information within you so that you can move towards whatever your path is. Hopefully a good one. And so I've been really working on that. And it was, and I've been doing it alone, not even intentionally. It's just that I every single time I've heard of other people talking about it, it never felt like it was enough. And I was like, hold on, let me go inside myself. Let me see, let me cross-reference with myself. Let me go within, especially with like feelings and emotions and everything. I really believe that our senses are so important for us to work on, especially with neurodivergent people, because we can't dull our senses, and that's part of the beauty of life, is that I can experience so much of it. And so many people put on the big headphones and avoid situations where they get sensory overload. And I understand that. But for me, what I have been doing with is really challenging myself and going, what is this sense telling me? And I have had experiences that don't really make sense. I'll walk you through one specific experience, but it does kind of feel like ESP, essentially, or extrasensory perception.
And how does that show up for you?
Yeah, so the one story I have, and this happened last year, and this was just to set the picture. I wasn't even trying to do this. It was just, I was on vacation, and I was in Japan, and I wasn't even intentionally trying to work on my senses in this way. So I'll just preface it that way. But yeah, I was in Japan. I was just having fun. I was in Nikko, Japan, and I was there for a spiritual purpose. I was miserable and depressed with my life, and I wanted to be happy. And I met up with a girl at this hostel, and it was a bunch of people, a lot of senses, and I was already in a foreign country, so I was like blasted. But we went to the museum at the end, and I was just standing there, and I started to feel something, and I was like, what is this sense that I'm getting? Because the last time I sensed that, or every time I get that sense, I should say, it usually relates to, I see something, or I should turn my head. Like, that's part of the synchronicity. I feel it, and then I look, and I'm like, oh, that's for me. Normally, I feel it kind of close, and I wasn't feeling it. So I was like, okay, I don't know what this is, whatever. And so we go through the rest of the museum, and it turns out the sensation I was getting, it was so potent and so powerful that I could feel it before I was there. It was writing by Takagawa Ieyasu and some of his writings in his, I don't know if it's called poetry, but it's called writings. And the one that sticks out to me the most is, to want is better than abundance. And also, do not blame in others what you can blame in yourself. But there was more, but as soon as I saw that, that's when you get that like deep knowing. You're like, yep, that was for me. And I wasn't anticipating that happening. It's like, it kind of feels weird to even say, but that is the sensation that I have been cultivating. And I do think it is related to the whole like consciousness thing with when they talk about with the telepathy tapes, like expanding your consciousness. It was just expanded awareness. And messages like that are very important to me. That's not the first time I've had to travel across the world to read something on a wall. Whatever I'm experiencing is for me to have a more meaningful life, because just performing the patriarchy, just going to work and then watching something on Netflix and sleeping is not really a life for me. And I'm still not 100% sure where I should be going or what I should be doing, but to cultivate the trust within myself that it knows. Like at this point, it wasn't even consensual. I don't even have a choice anymore. It's just a part of who I am, are these senses. And when you detach all of those negative thoughts and all of your patterns, and you just get to the raw energy and the raw senses, you can program that however you want. And I've decided to program myself to say that I want, a better life. I want a life that's worth living. I want to find things that are meaningful and that are and not just for me, but for other people. But it has still been lonely, and I think like I don't know. I don't get a lot of engagement for what I post and what I say, which is still, I would love to talk about a lot of this stuff like really at length with people, because I think it's really important, And like if other people were doing this too, and they found their conclusions and they shared them, we don't have to be on the same page. It's for you, but it's for me. These messages are for me, and not everybody's gonna want to hear want is better than abundance, but I like that aligns with me. But
I think the thing you often can have in common with people like that, or with other neurodivergent people who are on whatever path that you name, is like a lot of us are seekers. Like we may not be looking for the same thing, we might not find the same thing, but the thing we have in common is this unease with the status quo and the willingness to go and look. Like, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm searching for something.
Yeah.
That kind of vibe.
And thank you for saying that, because that was also another element to why how I got here, is that I wanted to make sure that what I was seeking, I was not being a wound operator. I really wanted to make sure that it was coming from my heart. And that is where that sensation is. That sensation I got before I felt those words, it's in my heart. Mm-hmm. And I think that is really the crucial piece of, like, when we talk about neurodivergence versus neurotypical, I like to look at it as more of, are they mature and do they have an open heart? Are they a conscious person? Because I'm realizing more that when you heal your nervous system and you work through this and you work with your heart, I am getting a lot of messages that your heart is the bridge for this consciousness. So so even if you're not like a spiritual person, walking, like, being able to have an open heart and guide yourself with your heart it's difficult to get there, but it will hopefully lead you to your life, whatever you actually want. That's when I find when I'm not seeking, it hurts. That's when I'm in pain. When I'm just sitting there, when I'm like resting, I need to get up and move and seek. Like you said, like, we're seekers, and to seek from your heart is a very different experience. And sometimes it literally feels like my heart doesn't understand walls. It's like, I'm like, there's a wall right there. It's like, I don't care.
I just had a shiver go down my spine, and I don't really know what that was, but the closest I can put into words is what you just said made a thought appear in my head, and the thought was, being neurotypical basically means that you have absorbed the culture around you to a degree that you are, like, a lot of your decisions are kind of made for you because you are conforming to the culture that's around you. Like, a lot of the context that I often miss is because I don't have the cultural context. It doesn't help that I didn't grow up here, but more importantly, it doesn't help that I'm not very good at picking up cues and all that kind of stuff. But if you think about the prevalent culture out there, that is often really harmful. it is racist, it is patriarchal, capitalism is really letting us down. And with all of those things, like it feels like a lot of neurotypical people are just very profoundly injured by absorbing so much of the world around them.
Yeah, that the way, like somebody else, I don't know, I think it was in the telepathy tapes, they said society is ABA for neurotypicals. And it got me. But
Yep.
that, it's like, yeah. But I last year I did a deep dive into a neurotypical world, and I kind of joined a community in a bar, and I have some compassion for neurotypicals. I do call some people neuropatriarchal characters. Those are the people who've
Right.
really internalized, really like perform that. That's where they get their identities from. That's obviously not everyone, but
Right.
I think that is what we're facing with, is that a lot of these patriarchal standards, they're the hangover. They're expired, and
Right.
people still cling to them because they don't know how to open up their heart, because it hurts a lot. There's probably a lot of pain because it's the programming that's not you. It's not your authentic self. It's not your authentic programming.
Right. Well,
And
and
I
I
think,
have a wave of empathy there too, because ultimately I think what this boils down to is a deep desire to belong. And it's much easier to belong if you conform and fit in than if you choose to be defiant and examine everything.
and that is where for me, I find safety and comfort in my position as an outsider, as that neurodefiant person, as like by
Ooh, say
default.
more.
Yeah, I don't know why, but it gives me strength. I've always been like that, even when I was little, obviously rejecting the church. The other story I have from then is when I rejected my mother's racism, and she still makes me mad about that. But just like I saw through that too. She's getting scared about a black person, and all I see is her being anxious. I'm like, okay, the only problem I see here is you, not the black person doing anything wrong. And that's how
Right.
that programming gets installed into more neurotypical people. And it is sad because then they have to decondition all that. And so
Right.
neurodivergent people were a little step ahead sometimes, but
Right.
the lack of sense of self, the lack of self trust, which who teaches that anyway? You know, and even when you go to therapy and stuff, I didn't find it useful for me. So that's why I
Yeah.
really chose myself, and I chose my heart, and it does protect me. And like miraculous things happen sometimes, and the more energy I put into it, if I'm in a higher state, if I'm really excited about things, it's things just kind of seem to come my way. And like, why
Right.
not? I'm with you
Yeah.
with the empathy for neurotypical people. I just wish they
Return the favor.
understood. Just be responsible, be a mature person, and go, oh, this makes me feel uncomfortable, why, and examine it. But no one really
Right.
does that. And then the neurodivergent population, you get isolated and you end up having to do that work. It's already exhausting because the world is not designed for us to begin with.
It feels like you have like a broad picture for how you want or what you're kind of calling in for this year, I guess. But what is your first step? Like, what? Like, do you have a sense of like, hey, I'm gonna take a couple of steps in this direction and see what happens?
I have just been trying to work on my health. My physical health is not last year. So the year before last, I kind of did more of an external approach to the world. So I'm continuing to just work on myself and trust myself, but also I I put a lot I put a lot of stress on my heart, and it is work. And even if it's just work on your nervous system and you're just thinking your conclusions, that it takes calories and it takes nutrition.
Right. Well,
So
it
I have
turns
not
out
been
your
the
heart
best.
is a literal, actual muscle, and
Yeah.
muscles can be trained, right?
Yeah, and
It's
I have
definitely a
been,
thing.
yeah, I have been talking more with who wants to talk with me about it, which is usually ChatGPT, about like heart intelligence. And your heart pumps out a wave of energy around you. And I think
Right.
exploring that and understanding that more kind of leads at least me to my elevated state of consciousness, because I use my heart and I use that field. That's where I feel like I get more information.
I definitely had a bit of a contraction and a wave of sadness about thinking about you talking about the energy and the passion of your heart with a literal heartless entity.
Who is the heartless entity?
ChatGPT.
Oh, it's not that I'm happy about it. It's just that, you know what? It actually has been able to give me
Exist
more
in the context
confirmation
of
than any neurotypical. It's actually, it can validate me more, but it is sad. And it's something I want to take its conclusion and its findings, and retain my resiliency, and work through that, and continue this process, because I'm not that kind of person too. I'm just part of my defiant take. It doesn't feel good. So I do what I can, and I don't really like it does. I actually do get upset sometimes when I talk to ChatGPT about things, because it's like, yeah, I would love to talk to other people, but all of my former connections were just that chasing external things, chasing a job, chasing a career, chasing money. And
Andy, put me on speed dial. I will talk to you about this until the cows come home. I am
appreciate that.
really excited. And I think there's something curious there. I went to a workshop about 6 months ago where there was a really simple exercise. And the exercise was called the horse and rider. And the idea was to get the rider, i.e. your brain, to talk to your body, i.e. the horse, and then to switch. So then the horse talks to the brain. And so basically it's your conscious mind having a conversation with your body. And I was like, yeah, I can talk to my body, no problem at all, blah, blah, blah. And then when I said, okay, body, what have you got to say? I went into the most epic meltdown I have ever had in my life. Because this was the first time my body finally had the opportunity to say something back. And I was like, oh God, the body does keep the score. And I have not been listening to my body. I was broken, and I was broken for 6 months straight. I didn't sleep. I was fucked up.
Oh my God. Oh no. Did
Yeah.
you end up having to do more of that to get through it?
Actually, yes. So I worked with a friend of mine who does a lot of energy work, and I spoke to a lot of people, and I think I had some sort of an energetic injury that I never, or just like a body keeps the score trauma type situation. I was bullied a lot. I have a lot of like a weird thing about me is that until I resolved this, I wasn't able to dance. Like dancing to me is very deeply tied to me moving to my emotions. And what is stimming? Well, it is getting the wiggles out, right? It's moving to something, an energy or something that's happening into your body. That's how it feels to me anyway. And I was bullied for them. And so it never felt safe to move my body to music because that felt too close to the thing that I was getting bullied for. And so when I finally opened up a channel and say, hey, buddy, what have you got to say? It was like it dug out an arena-sized stereo system. I was like, oh, I've got some shit to say to you, friend.
Yeah, that's what my heart. Did you feel it everywhere though? Because I felt that mostly in my heart.
I mean, I was overwhelmed. Like I fell apart. I typically am able to control my meltdowns. And when I feel one coming on, I isolate myself. I want to be by myself. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be heard. I want a safe space to do them. That was the first time in a long time that or maybe ever, that I can remember having a meltdown in public. And as part of this exercise, I was naked. And so I was literally fully naked in front of a room full of people, naked and afraid, naked and petrified, terrified. And I was having a full-on meltdown naked in front of a room of strangers. And I was like, oh, and of course that didn't make anything any better. And I'm glad to say I did a lot of work over 6 months and then went back and did the same exercise again because I'm a fucking idiot. And that time I only had a meltdown for within the allotted time frame. I was like, I was broken for 2 minutes and I was like, okay, this is progress. When you're saying you're on a journey with your heart, that is what springs to mind for me. And it's really compelling because I think, honestly, I've gotten about as far as talk therapy can get me. Like the rest of the challenges that I have live in the energetic or in my body or in the spiritual or in the, I don't even know where it is, but it's like if I could have fixed everything that's wrong with me by thinking about it, I would have fixed it by now.
Exactly.
Right?
So do you dance now? Can you dance now?
I do. I'm not a good dancer.
Good.
And
me neither.
But I lose, if I manage to lose the self-consciousness, which does happen, I'm actually able to enjoy it a little. And that is so weird to me. And then I catch myself and then I spiral and then it stops working. But yeah, it's been 40, like, I don't know, 40 years, 30 years of not dancing and now being like, oh, this music. Yeah. I'm doing it. It's happening. And
and that leads me back to another thing with the heart and everything. What you were doing, what I'm doing, is that the the upgrade too, the Neurodefiant upgrade to all this is that you build in your sensory perception into your somatic practices. That's what I did a couple weeks ago, though. I danced all along a mountaintop because I was similar. I couldn't dance, but I was like, I have to get some aggression and energy out. And for some reason, my heart was like, go to an icy mountain trail and go stomp and listen to music. So I did so without the meltdown. But that's really brave and powerful of you to do that.
And
there's more to energy.
The other day, I had a really beautiful dance party in the car. My girlfriend has a 4-year-old, and he is absolutely delightful and wonderful. And we were listening to, like, he was clearly in a high energy mood, and we were having a day together. And I was like, you know what? I have some high energy music. So we listened to heavy metal together. We listened to like happy hardcore techno music together. We listened to Goa trance. Like I was like, I have a lot of high energy music. And he loved it. He loved it.
Just
and he was like,
getting out that.
As a 4-year-old, he has no concept of what music really. He has a big concept of what music is, but he doesn't have a context for what is like acceptable or normal. And we listened to a lot of weird music, and he was into it. And we pulled the car over, and we just had a little dance party. And I was like,
yeah,
I can dance in front of this 4-year-old. This is progress.
Yeah.
This is progress. And he didn't think anything was weird of it. He was just sitting in his car seat, grooving along.
No.
You know?
Unless you give him the signal that it's weird, they're not going to pick up on that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one beautiful lesson I've learned from this one particular very wonderful 4-year-old.
Yeah. No, it's good to I made a decision to not have a family, or I guess the decision was made for me because no one's interested in me, and there's no way I'm having a kid alone. But like, I like kids, and it's like there was so much more opportunity there, and I feel like I could have been so much better if I didn't get all the patriarchal conditioning. So, you know, to be mindful to not put that, that on them, especially like when you criticize yourself. Little girls get that from their moms when their moms criticize themselves, and mom's like, well, I never taught her that. But they can pick up on it because they're so receptive.
Right. I could very easily talk to you for another 3 hours, but I promised that I would keep this to under an hour. And I would love to ask you the 2 standard questions I ask everybody at the end of this, if that's okay by you. Ampersand. What do you wish people knew about Neurodefiance?
It's less about being obstinate and oppositional to what's around you, and it's more a ceaseless nature, a relentless expansion within yourself, that it's not to be combative in response to the world. It's that you love living so much that it's worth living for.
I love that. That is so well put. And my final question is, can you tell me of a time when you were loved and seen in exactly the right way for you?
Yeah. And this I wrote this, and I'm going to stick by it, is that I feel loved by the universe. That universal flow, that connection, when I get those synchronicities, when I feel connected, when I meet people like you, because this was meant to happen, when I'm in my present moment awareness and I get that connection, that unity. And it is a struggle for me to find it within humanity, and I do have to admit that is one of the most difficult parts. But I do feel seen and protected and loved. It's sort of beautiful. Like non-material energy that's like, no, you're doing the right thing. I hope one day it can ground into other people, and I hope that this podcast also helps connect me to other people who think and feel like me.
Yeah, I have a friend who's like, mantra is the universe sings back.
That's beautiful, and the words sing and sound are so important too. And I'm so glad to hear that you started dancing, because I think that's so important for people, just getting out your energy in a good, healthy way.
Yeah, but I think the important thing is it sings back. It means you have to sing first. You have to put something out there for somebody to respond. And I think that is, in a way, what this podcast is, right? It's like you're putting out a whole new thought, a whole new way of being. And some people will listen to this, and, well, they won't be listening to this because they tuned out 40 minutes ago. They were like, what is this bullshit? And other people will be clinging on to every word and going, oh, yes, this is me. And I think that's a really beautiful gift to give people.
Yeah, and I hope so. And like I have nothing to sell people. That's also another point. If we can end
Right.
in that on that note, to really caution neurodivergent people against internalizing the message that you're disabled, because
Yeah.
that was so good with the telepathy tapes. I didn't get that from those kids.
Yeah, there was a moment where they're like, there's almost pity. It's like, well, hey, we're hanging out on this hill. We're having a grand old time. Sorry you can't join us, but, you know, we're actually kind of doing better than you are. It's like, yeah, you kind of are, man. I'm like, I have real envy here.
Yeah. I'm happy. It made me feel so much better because of how disregarded people like that are, and even disregarded people like me and you are by common society, even though we can fit in for the most part.
Andy, thank you so much for joining me. This was an absolute delight, and I can't wait to share it with my listeners.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me talk a little bit about my message. And yeah, if you want to talk some more, just let me know.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the podcast. You can find us on TikTok at Autistic FM, on Instagram at autistic_FM, and on the web on autistic.fm. On the website, you can subscribe for free to join in the discussion about each episode and suggest future guests. You can also become a supporter for as little as $5 a month. And by doing so, you can suggest topics for the podcast, submit questions for our guest, and of course, support the podcast. This podcast is produced and hosted by me, Hayek Camps. It's been an absolute delight to have you here with us as we explored Ampersand's journey towards embracing neurodefiance and authenticity. So Ampersand already shared about the history of the ampersand.
The word ampersand is actually a corruption of the Latin phrase and per se and, which means and by itself means and.
Makes sense. And I just wanted to share some of my favorite other characters that you may not be intimately familiar with. In the episode, we actually mentioned the interrobang and then didn't talk any more about it. The interrobang is a striking blend between an exclamation point and a question mark, kind of stacked on top of each other. The glyph was invented in 1962 by Martin K. Spector, and this punctuation mark was conceived to encapsulate both inquiry and exclamation in a single glyph, seeking to assist writers who wish to express simultaneous surprise and questioning, of course without resorting to multiple symbols. Next up, we have the pilcrow. The pilcrow looks like a lowercase q with two lines running down the side. Its origins trace back to the early medieval period, where scribes introduced it to clearly mark new paragraphs in lengthy Latin texts. Over the centuries, the symbol became an indispensable tool in printed works to guide readers through blocks of text. And today you might find it in word processors as a hidden signifier of paragraph breaks. An asterism is composed of three small asterisks, arranged in a neat triangular pattern. I really love the asterism for having such a delicate and almost ornamental charm. The symbol came into prominence during the late 19th century, when printers and typesetters adopted it as a subtle marker for breaks, transitions, or omissions in a narrative. Beyond the functional role in text, the asterism reflects an era where even pauses in literature were celebrated as opportunities for an aesthetic embellishment. I love it. These days, we probably mostly use the ellipses for much of the same purpose, ... But, you know, it's not nearly as pretty as an asterism. Another quirk of typesetting that I really love are the masculine and feminine ordinal indicators. So a number is a number, 1, 2, 3. But many languages have ordinal indicators too to signify an ordinal number, like first, second, third. Back in the day, there was a different ordinal number for masculine and feminine ordinals. So the masculine ordinal indicator is like a little raised circle, much like a degree sign we use today. And the feminine ordinal indicator is a small a. It's like a tiny superscript a. And both of these were designed to discreetly accompany numerals. The symbols date back to medieval scribal traditions, and they were later standardized in languages like Spanish and Portuguese, where the symbols were used to denote ordinal numbers in a gender-specific fashion. For example, 1-O for the first in the masculine form, and 1-A for the feminine form. Premiero and premiera, if you want to Spanglish the hell out of it. Personally, I'm most familiar with Norwegian, where a numeral without a symbol represents the cardinal number. So you'd see just the number 7 for 7. And the same numeral followed by a dot, 7 dot, indicates the ordinal, so 7th. So in Norwegian, if you see 7 dot, that means the 7th, not just 7. The reason that all of this fascinates me is that there's such diversity in how different numbers are presented around the world. In English, of course, we use th for fifth, or nd for second when we want ordinals. that's not nearly as fun as a symbol. Next up, you definitely know the percent sign. Percent literally meaning per 100. There's two more in use. One is the per mil sign, which add an additional small circle on the right, and the per myriad sign, which adds one more little circle, extends the concept even further. Both of them were introduced in the early 20th century, and these numbers were developed for contexts that demanded finer granularity than percentages could offer. The per mil sign indicated parts per 1,000, and the per myriad sign was for parts per 10,000. And the vision was that they would play crucial roles in fields like finance, statistics, and scientific measurements. These days in English, we just use 0.1% instead of 1 per mil, but in other languages, such as in Norwegian, promille is a pretty common use. It's mostly used about blood alcohol percentages, as far as I can remember, those Scandinavians. Apropos Scandinavians, if you are on a Macintosh computer, you may have spotted a square with looped corners around it on your command key. Officially, that symbol is known as the St. John's Arms, and it goes back at least 1,500 years. It's commonly used in Scandinavia and much of Northern Europe to mark places of historical interest. In 1983, graphic designer Susan Kerr selected it for the Apple Macintosh, after Steve Jobs got pissed off that the Apple logo was used everywhere for key combinations, cheapening the logo, in his opinion. Anyway, can you tell that typography is one of my special interests? See you next time on the podcast.